The metal walls breathe cold. I've been counting COA's inhales because it's the only rhythm I can control in here. Not the ship sounds outside that turned out to be a harbor. Not the muffled Korean I've been straining to parse through 8 centimeters of corrugated steel. Not the specific terror of not knowing whether the footsteps approaching right now belong to someone coming to move us farther away or someone coming to end us here. Seoa stirs against my chest. She's 3 years old and already knows how to read my heartbeat. Too fast means danger. Steady means sleep. Right now, I'm lying to her with my breathing. Slow, even. You're fine. We're fine. The footsteps stop outside the container door. I press my lips to her temple and taste salt. The men who put us here smelled like cigarettes and cut-rate cologne. These footsteps smell like nothing, which means whoever they belong to is disciplined enough to strip themselves of identifiers before moving through hostile territory. I know 2 people who move like that. One of them is dead. The lock disengages, not bolt cutters, a code, someone with authorization. I shift COA to my right arm and brace my left hand against the wall, getting my feet under me. The single beam of docklight cuts through the gap as the door swings open, and I force myself to look directly at whatever is about to walk through. Not because I'm brave, because if Park Joon-ho sees me flinch, he'll know I'm afraid of him. And I cannot afford that. Not tonight. Not with his daughter in my arms. He steps through the doorway, gun up, scanning. Then the light catches her face. And his drops. If you were sitting in a shipping container in the dark, holding a 3-year-old girl with her father's amber-ringed eyes, watching that father lower his weapon in slow motion as he realizes what he's looking at, what would you do? I had exactly 3 seconds before his shock became something else. My choice in those 3 seconds put everything in motion. This is how I got here. I have been preparing for this moment for 3 years. Not this exact moment, not the container, the dock, the cold, but the moment. The one where he finds out. In every version I rehearsed, I was the one who decided to tell him. I had time. I had control. I had a carefully constructed speech about choices and consequences and the difference between protecting someone and trapping them. Instead, I have a zip-tied wrist, a 3-year-old pressed against my chest, and Park Joon-ho staring at my daughter's face like he's watching the ground disappear beneath his feet. Joon-ho! My voice comes out steadier than I deserve. Put the gun down. He doesn't, but he lowers it another 3 degrees. His eyes move from Seoa's face to mine and back, doing the math that I've been doing since the moment I knew she was coming into the world. Dark irises, amber at the center, his jaw, my mouth, his cheekbones, sharpened slightly by my genes into something that will stop people cold when she's grown. She wakes up at the sound of my voice and turns toward the door. I watch him break, just for a second. A fracture across his expression that seals itself almost instantly, the way a wound closes on someone who has been bleeding so long they're used to the pain. His jaw locks. His grip on the weapon tightens before he finally holsters it. "How old?" he says, not a question. 3 years and 2 months. The silence between us is a physical thing, textured and pressured. I can hear his men outside, at least 4 sets of footsteps, perimeter positioning. I can hear the harbor sounds, a foghorn somewhere distant, water against concrete pilings, and I can hear Seoa make the small, uncertain sound she makes when she doesn't recognize a face, but her body isn't sure if it should be afraid. She has excellent instincts. She gets that from both of us. "Why?" Joon-ho says. 1 word. It carries the weight of the last 4 years. I didn't know until I was already gone. I hold his gaze because flinching now would be catastrophic. By the time I knew I'd seen enough to understand that I gesture at the dock, the container, the fact that I am literally sitting in a steel box in the dark, was what your life looked like. I thought keeping her away from it kept her safe. He looks at the zip tie on my wrist and something passes through his expression too fast to name. Clearly that worked. His voice is flat and cutting. I don't apologize. He doesn't want my apology, and I'm not sure he deserves it yet. Someone in your organization found me. That's why we're here. Whoever put me in this container, they know about her. They used her to move me. He goes still the way he always went still when the information he was receiving required a recalibration of everything he thought he knew. I'd forgotten that about him. How he could pull every bit of himself inward in a single breath and become, temporarily, something without edges. A man made entirely of assessment. Kim. He doesn't look away from me as he says the name. One of the men outside moves to the door. Cut her loose. His name is Kim Hyun-soo, and he has the careful eyes of someone who has been cleaning up other people's disasters for so long. He's pre-grieving the current one before it's finished. He cuts the zip tie without comment and retreats to the door. Junho takes off his jacket and holds it out to me. It's an expensive jacket. Charcoal wool, Italian cut, the kind that costs more than my last 3 car payments. I take it because Seo-ah is shivering. Tell me everything, he says, from the beginning. I wrap his jacket around my daughter and start talking. 4 years ago, I was a trauma nurse at Koreatown's Hanyang Medical Center, working nights because days meant daycare costs, and nights meant the shift differential keeping me 2 months ahead of my student loans instead of behind. I was good at my job in the specific way emergency medicine demands. Fast assessment, pattern recognition, the ability to make accurate calls on incomplete information, because there was never time to wait for the complete picture. The patient came in at 2 a.m. with a GSW to the upper left quadrant that had somehow missed everything vital, which was either extraordinary luck or extraordinary medical care administered before arrival. I noticed the second thing first. The wound was packed with a hemostatic agent I recognized as military grade, the kind that doesn't come from any pharmacy. And I noticed the first thing second when the man's eyes tracked my every movement with the focused alertness of someone who had been awake 36 hours and was still running threat assessments while I sutured him. You've had medical attention before this, I said. I fell, he said. You fell on a bullet, I said. And someone who knew what they were doing helped you before you came here. I'm not going to report what I actually think happened because you're stable. You're no danger to anyone in this room, and your paperwork is going to say laceration from a construction accident. But you should know that the next person who looks at this wound is going to see exactly what I see. He was quiet for a moment. Then, why tell me that? Because you should go somewhere else for follow-up care. I tied off the last suture, somewhere with fewer mandatory reporting requirements. He looked at me for a long time. You're very calm. You're very not dead, I said. I find that calming. Park Jun-ho came to check on him the next day. He came himself, not a proxy, not a driver, because that was the first thing I learned about him. He maintained his relationships directly. He was the one who made the calls, sat with the sick, attended the funerals. He walked into the staff consultation room where I was reviewing charts, introduced himself with his real name, and thanked me with such precise sincerity that I didn't realize until 3 seconds after he'd left that I'd agreed to have dinner with him. I learned what he was in pieces, the way you learn anything truly dangerous, gradually, then all at once. First, the security detail I told myself were bodyguards for a wealthy businessman. Then the deference of the restaurant staff, not toward wealth, but toward something else, something with teeth. Then the phone calls he stepped outside to take with an expression that made the air pressure in the room change. Then his lieutenant, Choi Dong-wook, walked into a room I was waiting in and didn't see me and said to someone on his phone, "The Hanguk Brotherhood's Sajongnim doesn't share. Keep that in mind before you approach him again." I was 3 months into the relationship when I left. I packed a single bag from the apartment I hadn't given up, told Jun-ho via text that it wasn't going to work, and was on a flight to Atlanta before he could respond. I was 6 weeks pregnant. I didn't know yet. Seo falls asleep in the back of the black SUV between me and the door, her breathing deep and even, her small fist curled around the collar of Junho's jacket. He sits on the other side of her, facing forward, and I watch him look at her the way people look at things they don't have language for yet. "She doesn't know about me," he says. Flat. Not accusatory. Just fact. No. What does she know? That her father is someone I loved very much who lives far away. I keep my voice quiet. That she has his eyes. He turns to look at me over the top of her sleeping head. There's something in his expression that I've never seen on any of the versions of him I thought I knew. "Who took you?" he says. "Two men. Korean. One had a tattoo on his forearm, a crane in flight, partial, like part of a larger design. I didn't recognize it, but it wasn't your organization's marks." I pause. They spoke to each other in regional dialect, not Seoul standard. Southeast, Gyeongsang maybe. They knew my address, my work schedule, and Seoa's daycare. I let that sit for a moment. They knew her name. His jaw tightens. Gyeongsang dialect. He says it like he's filing it. The one with the tattoo made a phone call before they put us in the container. He said, I close my eyes, replaying it with the internal recorder I never learned to turn off. "Mujin hwa mul iseo, sajangnimi olgeo ya, heavy cargo confirmed, the boss will come." Junho is silent for a long beat. "They wanted me to find you," he says. "That's what I've been sitting in that container thinking for 6 hours," I say. "Yes." His eyes move to Seoa's sleeping face, back to mine. The crane tattoo, Zhao Network, a Chinese organization out of San Gabriel Valley that's been consolidating import routes for 8 months. He says it with the careful neutrality of someone managing his response in real time. They don't usually work with Korean contractors unless someone sold them access, I say. I watch him absorb the word sold and understand what I'm implying. "Someone inside," he says. "Someone who knew about me," I say. "Who else in your organization knew you had an ex in Atlanta?" The silence that follows is the longest one yet. If you've ever had to tell someone that the betrayal they're about to discover has been rotting in their house for years, and you know that your survival depends entirely on how they handle that information, then you know why I'm watching his hands instead of his face right now. His hands are completely still. That, in its own way, is the most frightening thing he's done all night. The safe house is a mid-century modern in Griffith Park, the kind of unremarkable house that sits between two unremarkable houses and has a triple-car garage and soundproofed walls. Junho's people are already positioned when we arrive. I count 8, which means there are probably 12. Assignments confirmed before we even pulled off the dock. He runs operations the way I run trauma bays. Predetermined protocols, no wasted movement, everyone knowing their job before the crisis hits the door. Seoa wakes up when the car stops. She looks at Junho with the frank, unguarded scrutiny of a 3-year-old who has not yet learned that staring is rude. He looks back. "Hi," she says. His throat moves. "Annyeong," he says. Her face does the thing it does when she's processing new information. Lower lip slightly out, eyes narrowed, a miniature analytical expression that I have seen on exactly one other face. "You talk like Halmoni," she says. My mother's Korean church friends have apparently left an impression. "Do I?" he says. "She gives me candy," Seoa informs him with great seriousness. Something, not a smile, but adjacent to one, moves across his face and disappears. He looks at me over her head with an expression I don't have a word for. Then he gets out of the car and walks toward the house, and I follow with my daughter on my hip, and the night closes around us like a hand. The first 48 hours in the safe house are a negotiation conducted entirely in silences. Junho runs his investigation from the kitchen table, which becomes a war room in miniature. Phones, laptops, encrypted devices that Kim Hyun-soo produces from a black duffel with the casual efficiency of someone unpacking groceries. I set up COA in one of the bedrooms, with the stuffed animal, Kim's wife, apparently packed into the duffel alongside the tactical equipment, which tells me either Kim Hyun-soo has a remarkably warm domestic life, or Junho gave a very specific packing list. My medical training makes me useful in ways that override the awkwardness. When one of his outer perimeter men comes inside with a hand badly lacerated from a fence wire, I find the first aid kit, assess the wound, and close it in 4 efficient sutures that earn me a long look from Kim and a shorter but somehow heavier look from Junho. "You're still a nurse," he says. Statement, not question. Trauma, yeah. I transferred to Northside Hospital in Atlanta 3 years ago. I tie off the last stitch. Good unit. Good people. He nods once. I need to ask you something about the container, the approach. I knew this was coming. The men who took me, when they loaded us into the container, they sealed it with a numerical code, not a keyed lock. But the code they used wasn't the same code your man used to open the door. He goes still. How do you know that? I listened to the keypad sounds. 4-digit codes have a specific sound pattern depending on which keys you press. The resistance changes slightly between positions. Higher frequency keys produce a fractionally different tone from the lower ones. The code they used was high, low, high, high. Your man used low, high, low, high. I watch him process this. Someone changed the code between them loading me in and you arriving. Someone inside your organization updated the seal sequence and fed the new one to your team in real time. Which means someone inside knew exactly where I was and was managing your access to me. The kitchen is very quiet. You heard that through 8 centimeters of steel, Kim Hyun-soo says, not skeptical. The tone of someone making a careful note. I count things when I'm scared, I say. It's a habit. Junho is looking at me the way he used to look at me the first time he understood I wasn't going to be rattled by his world, like he's recalibrating an estimate upward. How many people had access to the container seal codes? He says to Kim. 3, Kim says. You, me, and Dong-wook, Junho says. The name settles in the room like sediment. Choi Dong-wook has been Junho's head of security for 7 years. He is 51 years old, built like a man who spent his 30s doing things that can't be explained to doctors, and possessed of a loyalty so long established that questioning it feels like questioning gravity. Every person in this house defers to him by reflex. When he walks into the war room on the second morning, I watch the younger men straighten slightly. That unconscious postural recalibration of people in the presence of someone whose approval matters. He doesn't know I'm here yet. Junho has kept my presence quiet. I watch from the second-floor landing. First inconsistency. He takes out his phone, a personal device, not a burner, which everyone in this house except me uses exclusively, and types a message before he's fully through the door, before he's greeted anyone, before he's scanned the room. It's a small thing. In another context, it wouldn't register. But a man who has run security for a Korean Mafia Sejongnim for 7 years does not reach for a personal phone in a safe house before he's confirmed his environment. He either doesn't know the situation is sensitive, which he does because he was briefed last night, or he does know, and he's so confident in something external that he's stopped running his normal protocols. Confidence. Where does that kind come from? I go back to my daughter's room and sit with the thought. Tell me about the Zhao network, I say that evening. Seo-ah is asleep. Junho and I are in the kitchen, 2 cups of barley tea between us, the first time we've been alone without operational activity demanding his attention. They consolidate, he says. They don't own product. They control routes, shipping, transport, documentation. 8 months ago, they started moving into routes my organization has run for 12 years. 3 smaller operators folded when they couldn't match Zhao's transit infrastructure. How do they know your routes? He doesn't answer immediately. If someone was feeding your import logistics to an outside organization, I say carefully, what would that person need access to? Schedules? Port documentation? Liaison contacts? All of the above. His voice is measured. Our port relationships took 15 years to build. Who manages those relationships internally? He looks at his tea. Security? Specifically, Dongwook. I keep my face neutral. One inconsistency isn't enough to accuse a man of 7 years standing to his own boss. I want to be useful while I'm here, I say. I'll be in the way if I'm just sitting upstairs with Seo-ah. I was good at reading people before I ever met you. Let me help. He studies me. You think staying close is safer. I think staying close means I see what you see, I say, which means I might see what you miss. He doesn't give permissions easily. I'd remembered that about him. He considers variables, assigns weights, makes decisions he intends to stand behind. Tomorrow, he says, we have a sit-down with my inner circle about the container incident. You'll be in the room. Why? Because I want to watch faces while you're introduced. Someone who knows about you will have a reaction. I want to see what that looks like. I drink my tea. And you trust me not to say the wrong thing? I trust you to notice everything, he says. That's not the same as trust. We sit in silence. Outside, a perimeter guard calls in a check. The house absorbs the sound. Why did you come yourself? I ask. To the container. Why not send Kim? He looks at his hands. I received an anonymous tip that a woman matching your description had been transported in a Zhao network container to the Alameda dock. He pauses. I've had 3 years. I knew your approximate location. I was... Another pause. Longer. I was looking, Maya. The use of my name lands differently than I expect. I was looking. Not for the container, not for leverage, for me. I don't say anything. Neither does he. The silence does its own particular work. The inner circle meeting is held the next morning in the first-floor living room, furniture arranged with the unconscious precision of hierarchy. Jun-ho at the head, Kim to his right, senior men in their established positions, and Choi Dong-wook to the left in the seat that is always his. I'm introduced as a medical specialist brought in as a consultant, which earns polite nods from most of the room and a very specific stillness from Dong-wook that I clock and file without reacting to. I sit in the chair Kim places for me against the wall, slightly outside the circle, a position of deliberate marginality. From here I can see everyone's face without appearing to watch anyone directly. Second observation. 40 minutes into the meeting, Jun-ho announces that the container incident has been traced to a compromised subcontractor in the Zhao network. A deliberate misdirection he and I agreed on the night before. I watch Dong-wook's shoulders release approximately 3 millimeters. The rest of the room either doesn't react or shows skepticism or relief. Dong-wook releases tension he was holding before Jun-ho said the wrong thing. He knew this meeting might expose him, and now he believes it won't. That is not the behavior of an innocent man receiving good news. That is the behavior of a guilty man getting a temporary reprieve. If you've ever had to sit perfectly still while the answer assembles itself around you, knowing that the moment you move too fast, the subject will see you seeing them and everything collapses, then you know what the next 2 hours feel like. You hold yourself like glass. You breathe through your mouth so your expression stays neutral. You keep counting. I tell Jun-ho that night, not the full accusation. I still need one more data point, something undeniable. But I lay out what I've observed in exact sequence. The personal phone before environment confirmation, the premature tension release, the specific behavioral markers that separate nervous guilt from innocent relief. He sits with it for a long time. Dong-wook, he says finally, like the word costs him something structural. I know, I say, 7 years. His voice is even, his jaw is not. I know. He carried my father's casket, Jun-ho says. I don't say anything to that. Some things don't need a response. They need space. I give him the space and watch him move the information from one part of himself to another. The way you move a wound from shock into the part of you that handles pain, functionally. I need proof he can't argue, he says finally. I know what to look for, I say. Give me access to your shipping documentation from the last 6 months. I'll find the pattern. He looks at me. For a moment, the careful strategic armor slips. Why are you doing this? You could take Seoa and go. I'd let you. Someone in your organization knows about my daughter, I say. That means she's not safe until I know the full scope of it. I can't leave until I know the full scope. I pause. Also, someone needs to find it. You're too close to him to see it clearly. I'm not close to him at all. He holds my gaze for a long beat. You're dangerously observant, he says quietly. You always were. It's not a compliment. It's a recognition. From him, the two have always felt like the same thing. He's close enough that I catch the scent of barley tea from earlier, and under it something clean and exhausted, and I make a decision not to think about that. I think about it anyway. The documentation, I say. Tomorrow, he says. Tonight? He stops. Tonight what? Tonight I'd like to sit with my daughter while she eats dinner, he says. He looks, for a single unguarded second, uncertain. It may be the most frightening thing I've ever seen him do. If that's acceptable. My throat does something complicated. I'll make her the thing with the rice and the egg, I say. She eats it for anyone who makes it right. The not quite smile again, closer this time. How do you make it right? He asks. Sesame oil at the end, I say. My mother's version. Don't ask me how a woman from Accra perfected Gairan Bap. I genuinely don't know. He almost smiles. I watch it happen and look away before he sees me watching. The documentation takes 3 hours and tells me everything. The shipping manifests for the past 8 months show a consistent pattern of minor transit delays on routes Junho's organization runs through the port of Long Beach. Delays of 2 to 6 hours that, individually, read as standard harbor congestion. But the delays cluster exclusively on routes where third-party inspectors filed clearance documentation. The third-party inspection firm's authorization codes changed 11 months ago, precisely when Dongwook renegotiated the organization's port liaison contracts. The new authorization codes route through a shell company. The shell company's registered agent address is a suite in a Century City office building. I find the suite number in the documentation and search it. Property management firm. The managing director's name, buried in a publicly available California business filing, is a woman with the surname Zhao. Third observation. Not behavioral this time, documentary. The thread runs from Dongwook's contract renegotiation through 11 months of deliberate route manipulation to a Zhao family property holding. Irrefutable. I print everything. I bring it to Junho. He reads the way he reads everything, completely still, total focus, no expression until he's done. When he finishes, he sets the pages down with careful deliberateness, as if setting them down too hard might shatter something. He's been feeding them our routes for almost a year, he says, and using the transit delays to skim freight off the top of your shipments, I say. The delays match inventory discrepancies in your quarterly reconciliation, small enough individually to look like normal loss, consistent enough across the pattern to be unmistakable. He's been building capital, setting up to leave. His voice is flat and exact. He was going to use you as the final proof of commitment, deliver you and Seoa to the Zhao network as collateral, take his payment, and disappear. The word disappear lands in my chest like a stone dropped from height. Seoa, I say. He was going to use our daughter as his exit fee, Junho says. The possessive comes out before he can moderate it, and neither of us acknowledges it out loud, and both of us hear it fully. Our daughter. He reaches for his phone. Wait, I say. He looks at me. If you move on him now, the Zhao network knows immediately. They have someone monitoring your internal communications, or they couldn't have coordinated the container timing with such precision. You move on Dongwook, Zhao escalates. You're fighting on two fronts simultaneously. I pause. But if you let me finish what I started, if we use what I found to force a negotiation instead of a confrontation, you resolve both problems at once. He is completely still. You want to use yourself as bait, he says. I want to use the documentation as leverage, I say. There's a difference. I have proof of what Zhao paid Dongwook and what they received for it. That's not just evidence against your security chief. That's 11 months of their operation fully exposed. They don't want that surfaced any more than you want a war. He studies me for a long, measured moment. Outside, I hear Seoa's voice from upstairs, awake from her nap, talking to the stuffed animal, the running monologue of a child who is perpetually narrating her own existence. I hear Junho hear her. If this goes wrong, he starts. It won't, I say. Then, more honestly, if it goes wrong, you have the documentation and you know the full scope. You're no worse positioned than you are right now. I'm worse positioned if you're in Zhao's hands. There's something in the way he says it that isn't strategy. Then make sure it doesn't go wrong, I say. He looks at me for a long time. Then, I pay my debts, Maya. I protect what's mine. A pause. You and Seoa. Whatever happened between us, whatever you chose, that doesn't change. I'm not yours in the way you mean that, I say carefully. In the way I mean it, he says. You're someone I would burn this entire operation to the ground before I let anyone touch. That is what I mean. I don't have a response to that. Not one I'm ready to say out loud. Tell me the plan, he says. Dongwook arrives at the safe house at 9 the following morning for a scheduled security briefing. What he finds instead is Junho at the kitchen table, me in the chair against the wall, and Kim Hyun-soo standing at the door he just came through. He takes in the configuration and I watch his face. He's good. 7 years of close proximity to a dangerous man has given him a controlled expression that would fool most people. But his eyes move to me once, just once, before moving back to Junho, and in that single glance I see the calculation, the conclusion, and the micro-decision about how to play this. He's going to deny everything. He's going to make it about me. Sajangnim, he says, respectful, steady. There's something I need to tell you about the woman. Sit down, Dongwook, Junho says. She's not who she appears to be. Sit down. The second repetition carries a different weight entirely. Dongwook sits. Junho slides the printed documentation across the table. Start with page 4, he says. The shell company registration. Walk me through how your name appears as a signatory on the subsidiary authorization. Dongwook looks at the documents. Something in his face goes very still. I protected you, Junho says, his voice quiet in the way that is the opposite of calm. When the Busan deal went wrong and 3 of your men didn't come home, I told their families it was clean and covered the settlement from my own accounts. When your son needed surgery that insurance wouldn't cover, I paid without being asked. When you asked me to promote your nephew over 2 men with twice his experience, I did it without asking your reasons. 7 years, Dongwook. 7 years of Gamsahamnida and Yeongnim. And now I'm sitting here with documents that tell me you were selling my roots to the Zhao family before my father was cold in the ground. Silence. The Zhao network approached me 18 months ago, Dongwook says finally. Flat. Resigned. Not begging. He knows better. After Busan. You were stretched. I thought the organization was going to fracture. You were taking on too much, moving too fast. I thought I was positioning us for a managed exit, a soft transition. You thought you were positioning yourself, Junho says. Dongwook doesn't deny it. The woman and the child, Junho says. What was the arrangement? Proof of loyalty delivery, Dongwook says. One concrete asset connecting you to civilian exposure, someone you couldn't officially acknowledge, handed to Zhao as collateral for my setup payment. They take the asset, you can't escalate without exposing the child. I walk. The child, Junho says. The two words are the quietest he has spoken all morning. I didn't know. You knew she was 3 years old, Junho says. Dongwook says nothing. Junho stands. He doesn't raise his voice. He doesn't move toward Dongwook. He straightens his jacket, slowly, with precision, and then looks at his security chief with an expression I've never seen on a human face before and hope I never have cause to see again. Kim, he says, take him to the office. We'll finish this properly. Dongwook is escorted out. He doesn't resist. I watch him go and think about the crane tattoo on the man who sealed us in the container. Dongwook's outside contractor, used and expendable. Another piece of the documented pattern. Another thread in the weave. The room is very quiet. He had a reason, I say carefully. Yes, Junho says. That doesn't... No, he agrees. It doesn't. He sits back down. He puts both hands flat on the table and looks at them for a moment. You said we use the documentation for leverage, not confrontation, he says. I did. Make the call, he says. Tell me what you need. The Zhao Network's negotiating representative, a woman in her 50s named Ms. Liang, who carries herself with the precise manners of someone who learned etiquette as a survival tool, meets us the following afternoon at a Koreatown restaurant Junho has cleared and wired. She arrives 12 minutes early. I clock it. Either she's compulsive about punctuality or she wanted time to assess the space before we arrived. Fourth observation. I arrived 30 seconds after her, through the side entrance. She's already seated across from where Junho will sit, arranging the table's small details with the unconscious competence of someone managing their environment before the primary actor enters. When Junho, already at the table, nods in my direction, and she finally sees me in the adjacent seat, the only reaction she allows herself is a single blink, controlled but present. She was expecting to negotiate with him alone. My presence changes her calculus, and she knows it immediately. I set the documentation folder on the table and slide it toward her without opening it. The contents of that folder include 11 months of your organization's transit activity through Port of Long Beach, the shell company registration with your principal's family name as the authorized agent, and the recorded communications between your network's liaison and a former member of Mr. Park's security staff. I keep my voice exactly what it is in a trauma bay. Steady, informational, no invitation for negotiation on the facts themselves. The word former is important. Mr. Park has resolved that internal issue. Miss Liang doesn't open the folder. She looks at Junho. "Joseonghamnida," she says. Formal apology. Perfect pronunciation. For the contract engagement, not the conduct. The conduct originated with your former employee. The conduct was enabled by your payment, Junho says. She inclines her head. What are your terms? Full withdrawal from all Port of Long Beach routes currently operated by my organization, Junho says. Permanent. No incursion for 8 years. Compensation for the freight discrepancies. Your accounting team will find the figures in the documentation and the names of every contact your network built inside my operation over the past 18 months. Ms. Liang looks at the folder. And in exchange? The documentation stays private, Junho says, and I don't pursue liability for the container incident through channels that would be considerably more disruptive to both organizations than this conversation. She looks at me. Who is she? The person who found the documentation, Junho says. She'll be present at the transfer of the contact list to verify completeness. A pause. Precise, calculated duration of exactly the time it takes to accept a position you have no leverage to refuse. We accept the terms. It takes another 40 minutes to work through the specifics. Ms. Liang is precise and professional and surrenders the contact list with the minimal resistance of someone who has already written off those assets as operational cost. When she leaves, she nods to me before she nods to Jun-ho. Deliberate. It means something. I decide not to unpack it here. Kim Hyun-soo materializes at the table as soon as she's through the door. Clean. Jun-ho looks at me. How did you know she'd take the terms? She arrived 12 minutes early, I say. She wanted to assess the space, which means she came prepared to negotiate. If she'd been authorized simply to refuse, she'd have arrived on time or slightly late, the cadence of someone who already knows their position. Early arrival means information gathering. People gathering information are already negotiating. They just haven't said so yet. Kim makes a sound that might be, from him, wild enthusiasm. Jun-ho looks at me for a long, quiet moment. Come on, he says finally. Seo-ah will be awake. That night, after Seo-ah is genuinely asleep, the boneless, absolute sleep of a child whose body has decided the danger is over, Jun-ho finds me in the kitchen. I am making tea. When the adrenaline drops, my hands need occupation. Old habit from long shifts, from the hours after losing a patient, from every night I train myself to come down slowly instead of crashing. He stands in the doorway for a moment before coming in. He sits at the table. I bring 2 cups and sit across from him. And we are, for the first time since the container, simply 2 people in a kitchen at the end of a very long week. I want to talk about the future, he says. I know. She's my daughter. I'm not going to... He stops, starts again more carefully. I'm not going to disappear from her life. What that looks like, how we arrange it, I want that to be a conversation, not something I decide unilaterally. I look at my tea. I left because I was afraid of your world. I know. I was afraid for her, I say, not just myself. I watched my little brother die when I was 16. 2 crews settled a dispute on a residential street and he was walking home from basketball practice. He was 14. I keep my voice level through long practice. I swore when I left that she would never live in the proximity of that kind of violence, that she would never have to calculate whether the man coming through the door was safe. He is quiet for a long time. And yet, he says carefully, she was in a container on a harbor dock because someone tried to use her against me. Yes, I say, which is the thing I've been sitting with since I got out of that container. There is no safe distance when the threat is specifically you. I pause. That's not an accusation. It's a fact I have to make peace with. What does making peace with it look like? He says. It looks like what we just did, I say. It looks like me being in the room, not behind a door somewhere being protected from information. It looks like Seo-ah having a father who is what he is without pretending otherwise, and a mother who knows how to read a room. He looks at his hands, then at me. The Zhao network will test the terms, he says. Not immediately, but within 6 months they'll probe for weakness. I know. When they do, he says, I want you to be the person who sees it first. It is not a romantic declaration. It is not a proposal. It is Park Jun-ho offering me the thing he considers most valuable, a place in his architecture, recognition, an assignment of irreplaceable trust. From him, that is everything. We have things to work out, I say. You and I, about us, about what 4 years and a lot of silence means, and what comes after it. Yes, he says, I'm not making any decisions tonight. No, he agrees. We drink our tea. The house is quiet around us. The specific quiet of a secured perimeter, a sleeping child, a day that ended with more of its people intact than it threatened to leave. Outside, one of Kim's men calls a check-in. The call comes back clean. I look at Jun-ho across the table and think about the moment the container door swung open and his face did what it did when the dock light found Seo-ah's eyes. That fracture sealed over, that recalibration, that weight shifting from one set of coordinates to another. from the man who runs an empire to the man who is somebody's father and has only just understood it. 3 years ago, I made a choice based on fear. It was a reasonable fear, born from real grief, grounded in what I watched happen to a 14-year-old boy on a residential street on an ordinary Tuesday. It was also, in the end, the choice that put my daughter in a steel box in the dark. I am not sure what the right choice looks like from here. I am completely sure I want to be the one making it. Get some sleep, I say. We have a lot to figure out tomorrow. He stands. At the kitchen doorway, he stops. Maya. Yeah. Gamsahamnida, he says quietly. For what? He leaves unspecified. We both know what he means. I nod once. He goes. I finish my tea alone in the clean silence of the house, and outside the window, Los Angeles does what it always does. It keeps moving, indifferent and blazing, entirely unaware of the things that happen at its edges in the dark. If you've ever had to decide whether to trust the person whose world nearly destroyed you, knowing the threat isn't resolved, only delayed, knowing your daughter has her father's eyes, and there is no longer any undoing that, tell me what you'd choose. Would you have stayed, the way I'm staying? Or would you have taken the documentation and the child and run while the term still held? Because I chose to stay. And 3 days after the Zhao negotiation, Kim Hyun-soo came to me with a name from the contact list. A name I recognized. Someone working inside my hospital. Someone in my world. The other arm of the exposure Dong-wook built over 2 years. Park Joon-ho set the contact list on the table between us and said, "Your call. How do we handle it?" He asked. Not told, not decided. Asked. I don't know yet what we are to each other, whether there is a word that exists for 2 people who share a daughter and a past and a set of enemies and a kitchen table at midnight. I don't know if the Zhao network holds to the terms or if something harder is coming, but he asked, and I'm still here. And Seo Ah, asleep upstairs with her father's eyes and her grandmother's recipe and the stuffed elephant Kim Hyun-soo's wife packed next to a tactical radio. She doesn't know any of this yet. She will. I'm going to be the one who tells her.